Hi, my name is Jason Hugh, and I am doing my presentation on ethical dilemma that we wrote our paper on. The ethical dilemma that I am choosing to present today is the scenario where John is a counselor intern at a school in the area that he's from. Um, he gets a friend request from one of his students. He's running two after school groups, and one of his students, Ben, reaches out through social media to befriend him. And he likes Ben, works well with him, so he accepts his friend request. A few days later, another student, Jeannie, reaches out with a friend request. Um, John doesn't care for Jeannie, not fond of her because she's argumentative in the group, so denies the request, and then explains to Jeannie later that he doesn't befriend female students. There's a lot of problems in this scenario. I think the primary issue is there are boundary issues with the student that John is creating by inviting him into his personal social media account. Then there's the secondary issue of how he is treating two students with inequality. Um, the problems could run the gamut, I believe. It could be an ethical problem where it is blurring relationship boundaries and possibly encroaching upon confidentiality if there's the potential for people making the connection and identifying the student as part of this group. Then there's legal problems, which again broaches on confidentiality. Um, if again some identifying information could violate FERPA laws or even whatever current state laws there are. Then it's a clinical problem as well because it can create a power struggle and hierarchical relationships. Um, you know, he made that excuse to Jeannie that he doesn't um, follow girls or befriend girls in social media. That in itself is a problematic statement, but the fact that it's a lie, um, it potentially creates this hierarchy. And then the confession that he doesn't, he's not fond of her because of her actions, um, can really create a power dynamic that's not healthy there. It's a professional problem because it is exposing students to John's professional life, and that can be problematic if certain posts are inappropriate. It crosses the boundary of professional and personal. And then it's a technology problem because it's on social media and potentially private messages or things that are read. It's this electronical documentation and could create a lot of problems for John. Um, and this problem is really between the counselor and the two students, heavily weighted on the counselor's responsibility. There's a bunch of standards that are being touched upon here, um, but just to list some, for the ASCA standards, you have A5, A, C, and H, and those are all relating to sustaining healthy relationships and managing boundaries, which um, John is violating on a number of levels. Um, there is A7B, and that's related to the dynamics of group work and the value of having, or the ethic of having equality amongst the members. So if he's friends on social media with with Ben, and he does not befriend Jeannie, that creates inequality in the group. Um, Ethical standard A11A touches on bias. Now, the counselor is supposed to be addressing bias, but in this situation is actually creating the bias, which is violating ethical standards. And then ethical standard B3I that talks about professionalism. Again, befriending somebody on your private and personal social media account is very unprofessional. Moving on to the ACA Code of Ethics, you have A5E, and that talks about virtual relationships, directly addressing social media and the ethical standards of separating between professional and personal. And then ACA Code B7B, potentially again broaching upon confidentiality. In Hawaii, we have Code of Ethics Principle 5A1, and then there's FERPA laws that could be, again, divulging personally identifiable information. That's subpart A, 99.3A. To me, John appears to be violating a number of moral principles. Justice is one of them, and treating students with equality. Again, going back to the previous slide, you're creating an unequal balance or an unequal relationship between you and Ben, and then you and Jeannie. Again, even in the statement, if it were true that you don't befriend girls, that in itself creates an inequality. But then knowing deeper that there's a bias, and that's where it goes to the beneficence and doing good. He is not doing good by lying to Jeannie and having this bias within himself, and then the maleficence not doing wrong, and in Ben's case, definitely making the wrong choice. There are a couple of articles that talk about this, ethical considerations with boundaries in social media, and experiencing rural counselors' experience with dual relationships was a fascinating one, because it talked about John being in the local area of the school that he was interning at, and this article talking about how lines get blurred when you're in a small community in a rural area, and how to establish boundaries when potential dual relationships are there. Some professionals that I would reach out to for supervision or consultation. Kelly Asato is the director of counseling at the school, and certainly would be my first line of defense in consultation. And then I have a former colleague, Nathan French, who is the school-based behavioral health program manager for the Windward District of the Department of Education in Hawaii. Comes with a lot of experience and education, and would very much trust his opinions. And then the organizations that seem like no-brainers to me is the Hawaii School Counselors Association, and on the national level, the American School Counselors Association. Some potential courses of action that you could take. I think one is use this incident to talk about the health of social media. One of the things that is well researched is the impact of social media on sleep. And so this article by Graham and others talks about how sleep is impacted through social media use. The other course of action that could possibly be taken is creating an individual professional account. There was this article by Tong and Yu, and it was talking about how a lot of businesses and organizations are embracing social media, and it is ubiquitous, and it is a part of our social construct. And so they're using, a lot of organizations are using social media as a platform. And so possibly John could create a separate professional social media account. And then the last thing is just setting clear boundaries. I think just being firm, being black and white, hey, sorry, I can't do this. This isn't going to work. And uh, there's articles, a ton of articles talking about the importance of having those professional boundaries. Of course, for every action, there's potential consequences for the teaching moment. If you decide you wanted to try to make a teaching moment out of it, it could potentially cause embarrassment to the student. They might have a sense of shame if they identify that this is being taught because of me, even though other people might not know. If Ben knows, Ben might worry about what other people might know. And then it could also come across as making the teacher seem maybe arrogant or lofty, or um, you know holding something over the kids. I know a lot of eye rolls, right, when older people talk about social media and other things. So I think they could possibly create a gap between the counselor and the students. And then for the creating a professional account, I think you can potentially run into the same issues with confidentiality. But then on top of that, um, additional monitoring is needed. So someone's going to have to run this social media account, and that's going to take an extra time. Um, and for the last one, setting clear boundaries, and depending on how you do it, you could really shut the students down. You can make the counselor seem rigid and really impact the relationship that counselor has with student. If I were in this situation, the course of action I would take is a combination approach. I think I would use the teaching moment and setting clear boundaries together to create excuse me, create a curriculum for the group on the health and safety of social media. If I made a general curriculum and it was part of the lesson for the day, I think that would be something that would be possibly avoiding some of those consequences. And then in it, as part of the curriculum, I think you can include um, information on maintaining professional boundaries and what that means for social media use. When I consider the course of action that I would take and measure it to a test of justice, um, is there equality in the approach that I'm taking? If I did a general curriculum and a lesson for the day, I think the curriculum would be addressing all the students. Social media is, again, so ubiquitous that I believe it doesn't target anybody. I think it would address all students. And then when I think of the test of publicity, would I want people to know about it if it was in the news? Yeah, I think if I use vetted curriculum, I'm sure there's a lot of very researched material out there, statistics and facts. If I had all of those things, yeah, I would embrace the media to do some publicity on it. And then the test of universality. Um, I think it's absolutely something. Again, if you're using a curriculum that's general, if it's vetted, if it's research based, I would be happy to pass that on to colleagues, in my state or even in the country. So, in order to implement this strategy, first I would need to remove Ben from my friends on social media. If I'd already added him, I would need to remove him. Um, these first two steps, I'm not sure which one necessarily would go first, but definitely would have to seek Ben out for a private conversation. I wouldn't want it to be in front of other people, and I would want to do this before implementing any kind of curriculum, for that sake of the consequence that was mentioned. Is I wouldn't want Ben to think I was passively or passive aggressively trying to send a message to him. The next thing I think would be to consult with ASCA and the Hawaii School Counselor Association for factual data. Um, Try to get some real solid material, state and national level statistics and material that I can use in my curriculum and presentation. And then with all the information I would gather, I would develop a group curriculum that I can present. Again, if I could get some other stuff that's vetted and maybe customize it for my particular group, I would put those things together. And finally, if I was able to put together a curriculum, I would definitely run it by the people that I mentioned, Kelly, my supervisor, and Nathan French, my former colleague, for their expertise and to look over anything I might be missing. And with Kelly being my supervisor, I would definitely invite her to come and be a part of the group to observe and to give any feedback, and then present the curriculum to the group. After the curriculum is presented, I would want to engage in a discussion or evaluation of the material, subject matter, and how they felt.